In this video, I'm going to give a brief overview of all of the items that are included in our basic soldering kit, item number KT125. In addition to going over all of the items within this kit, I'm also going to give you a couple of additional items that you may want to add to your list of tools to help make your soldering jobs easier. To begin, let's go over the list of items that are included in the kit. You have your max flame torch, a 16-ounce hot pot, a jar of Sparox non-toxic pickling solution, a syringe of silver solder, a container of handy flux, a magnesia block, copper tongs, tweezers, cross-locking tweezers, and last but not least, a tripod with a removable mesh screen. Each of the kits are also going to come with an instructional DVD for basic soldering. The very first item that we're going to go over is the magnesia block. This is the fireproof surface that you will put your work on when you're soldering. Now, for added safety and protection, I'm going to recommend an additional item for you to use with this magnesia block. Because I typically work with a charcoal block when I'm soldering, I like to get in the habit of having a type of buffer between my initial soldering block and my overall work surface. So the buffer that I'm using here is an old soldering block, and I've had this laying around. But you can also use a large piece of tile that you can pick up at most any hardware store. The next item in this kit is a max flame torch. This is a good all-around torch for most of your soldering projects. If you also need a more precise flame, I would suggest looking at our item number S0300 or our micro flame torch. When your torch is sent to you, it's sent to you empty. You need to provide the fuel, so here's an additional item that you'll need to pick up. Butane fuel is available at any grocery store or even hardware store, and it's simply the same type of fuel that's used to light Zippo lighters or the like. How you fuel your torch is by picking it up off of its base, flipping it over, and you're going to notice a fueling point back here on the bottom. You're going to hold the butane fuel straight up and down as you are your torch, and you're going to press down on that fuel for at least 10 to 15 seconds or until you hear that hissing noise. That means that the canister is full and you're set and ready to go. You'll notice that there's a switch on the back of this torch. This is the safety switch that you need to press down before you press the ignition switch. Another thing that you're going to notice over here on the back end of this torch is that there's a toggle. Now this toggle goes from minus to plus. You'll notice that as I have the torch lit, I can increase the size of the flame just by toggling that switch back and forth. For me, I like to have it about 3/4 of the way over. Another thing that you're going to notice is that there's a lever here on the front, which regulates how much oxygen is fed to your flame. I typically leave that alone when I'm doing basic soldering, and as you're starting out, there's really no need for you to mess with this. There's also a toggle over here on the other side of this torch. This toggle will give you continuous flame even when your finger is not holding this ignition switch button down. I personally do not rely on this switch at all. I like to have my finger always on the button, so in case there is an emergency or in case I drop the torch, as soon as my thumb comes off that button, the flame is gone. The next item in our kit is a 16-ounce crock pot. This is used to hold your pickling solution to clean your metal after your soldering. The pickling solution that's included in your kit is Sparox. Now you only need to use less than half of this package to fill up the 16 ounces. A full package of this will fill 32 ounces. And in fact, to tell you the truth, I don't even use half. I use about just a bit over 1/4 of the package to fill this up. One important thing that you have to remember whenever you're working with water and acids, this is an acid. You're going to add the water first to your container, and then you're going to add the pickling solution to the water. This crock pot only has one temperature setting on it, so as soon as you plug it in, give it about half an hour and you should be ready to go. Do you have to throw out this Sparox after you're done using it? No. You can use this Sparox over and over and over again until the actual material inside of the crock pot turns to a green bluish color. That's going to be plenty of uses. This Sparox is going to last you for a very, very long time. The next tool that we have on our list is our silver solder. Now this silver solder comes with 2 syringe tips, a medium size and a small size, so that you can dispense the correct amount of silver solder and flux that are both combined onto your project. The type of solder that this is medium solder. Now if you're just starting out, to give you a brief overview, we sell 3 different kinds of solder: hard, medium, and easy. Medium is absolutely perfect if you're doing projects that require one solder joint. If you're doing a more complex project such as a ring, you're probably going to want to invest in getting a tube of hard solder and easy solder. The reason for this is that when you're doing multiple solder joints onto a project such as a ring, you want to make sure that when you go to solder one of these joints, you don't want another joint that you've already soldered to come undone. This is why there's 3. Hard solder will melt at a much higher temperature than easy solder would. The next item that we have in our kit is Handy Flux. Handy Flux is a bit unnecessary if you're using this tube of solder that came with the kit. Remember, I told you that this tube of solder comes with silver solder and flux already mixed together in this tube. Well, why would you use this then? As you get more involved in your soldering technique, you're going to want to use wire solder. This is silver solder wire, and you're going to use this flux to put a light coating over the joint that you wish to solder. Now, don't put too much flux on this joint. Too much flux on a joint is almost as bad as having too little. And as with the solder in this syringe, silver solder wire is available in the 3 variations as the syringe: hard, medium, and easy. This flux can also be used with other solders, such as our 14-karat gold solder sheets and our Stay Bright solder that you can use with nickel and copper wire. Now in your kit, you're going to find 3 different types of tweezers. There's copper tongs, cross-locking tweezers, and then number 1 tweezers, or what we like to call knotting tweezers. These knotting tweezers are typically used to pick up bits of solder. Remember, this is used for if you're working with the wire solder. You're going to cut off very, very small bits of solder and then use your tweezers to pick them up and place them right onto the joint right before you apply the flame to the flux and melt the solder into the joint. These cross-locking tweezers have also been included in your kit so that you can hold on to an item as you're soldering it. These pieces at the back of the tweezers are made of wood, so heat won't conduct through this part as easily as it will the rest of the tool. The cross-locking helps as well because pressure has to be placed onto the back to open the tweezers instead of using pressure to keep the tweezer jaws closed. This is another part of your toolkit that you can upgrade to make your soldering projects go that much easier. I would recommend picking up a third hand. This is item number SO165. This allows both of your hands to be free as you're soldering because you can place the item that you are soldering right into the tweezers and then let the tweezers go. This is way better than holding onto your piece as you're soldering. You get more stability this way when using a third hand. Now we move on to the copper tongs. These helpful tweezers are used to take your soldered piece from the quenching bowl to the pickle pot. So why do we use copper tongs? Well, for one, the copper won't contaminate the pickling solution and it won't react to the pickle in the way that other metals will. Now, last but not least, the final item that's included in your kit is a mesh tripod with a screen. This mesh tripod allows you to reach the underside of your work. You see, sometimes you need to solder with a larger piece of metal, and rather than using the flame to heat just one area up here on top and possibly displace the little pallion of solder on the joint, using direct heat underneath the piece will eliminate this problem. Now, like I said in the beginning of the video, there are a couple items that I would recommend that you add to your kit so that it helps make your soldering technique go a little bit quicker and easier. There is an essential item that you need to add to your kit, regardless of how basic a technique you're doing. You need to have some type of quench bowl. Pick something that's sturdy and fill it with water. And then, when you're all done with your soldering and you're ready to put the piece into the pickle, first dip the piece into the quenching bowl for just a couple of seconds. Hot metal may make the water spray when it's quenched, and it's better to be sprayed with water as opposed to the pickling solution. We already went over the third hand, and like I said, this is really going to help you out so that you can have both hands free when you're soldering. It would be very wise to invest in one of these just to make everything much easier. I would also recommend that you pick up a pick. Picks are used to move the pallions of solder around when heat is applied. These would take the place of the number 1 tweezers in your kit. This is item number PK945. Tungsten won't stick to either the solder or the metal that you're applying the solder to. Another thing is that contamination on this type of metal pick is virtually impossible, and it can be bent into any angle that you may need. You should also have a couple of files on hand. Now, these shouldn't be your best files, as you're only going to use them to file off any excess solder that accidentally adheres to your tools. I've always liked this little 5-piece set, and I keep it with me whenever I'm soldering. This is item number FL900. When you remove your piece from the pickle, it should kind of have a uniform matte finish to it. Well, in order to polish the metal up, you should have some type of polishing cloth or pad. For simple soldering projects like jump rings or chain, I like to use these Pro Ultra pads, item number BF695. These little durable pads will easily put a polish back onto your finished piece. Now, for a few moments, let's take a look at some safety tools. First, whenever you're working with metal or whenever you're soldering, always make sure that you're wearing safety glasses. Also, you always want to make sure that you have adequate ventilation whenever you're soldering. If you'd like to take further precautions, you can always invest in a respirator like what I have here. You can find this at most hardware stores. If your soldering project calls for any sawing, filing, or polishing with the flex shaft machine, pick up a roll of Pro Wrap, item number BF250. Now, this has saved my fingers more times than I can count. It's also called alligator skin, so if you ever see it anywhere, that's what it is. It's extremely sticky, but the great thing about it is that it sticks only to itself. You're simply going to wrap it around your finger and then rip it off just like that. Like I said, this is a finger saver for any time that you're doing polishing, filing, or sawing on your soldering project. You should also invest in a type of apron. We have one, item number AP200, anytime that you're doing metal work. Not only does it protect you and your clothes from any material that comes off of your project from sawing, filing, or polishing, but it also has this convenient pocket for you to keep tools and or other material within reach if your workspace is running a little bit out of room. Before we wrap it up, I'd like to remind you that we have many great reference books, including this handy book. This is Soldering Made Simple, item number BK145, and this is great reading for anybody just starting out. There are tips in here on how to solder effectively based upon what kind of project you're soldering. And the projects in here go from basic all the way to intermediate, all while giving you step-by-step instruction and explaining everything along the way. I hope that you enjoyed this video on all of the items that we have in our basic soldering kit.